It's raining all day, and I can't think of a better way to spend it than making a video talking about books. Hello, welcome back to my channel. I want to start this video by saying I'm sorry because this might be the only one or one of the videos that I will post this month because work is it's crazy. And so today I want to do something that was not really hard, but it will be really fun too, I hope. It's June now, so today we are going to review all 28 books I have read this year so far. I divided them into two piles. We'll start with literature and followed by a pile about murder stories / mystery. And as some of the books here we have talked about before in previous videos, we'll keep it short and simple as possible. And I hope you will like it. So let's get started. So as said, we will start with the pile of literature. Robert Walser, The Walk. I'm sorry, but I have to start with this. I didn't really particularly enjoy reading this book because I was a little bit struggled to read it because it was not really plot driven. There was a lot of observations about humanity and human life and a discussion of what was on our mind when we do daily life events. But I will say this, if you are a fan of the Apple TV show Severance, you will maybe, I suspect you might enjoy reading this book, especially the first half of this book. It talks about work, how do you feel when you're stuck in it, not just work, but also your life, what kind of dilemma we usually found in office or in usual life, and how are we going to deal with it. If you are interested in this type of topics, you will probably like the book. But I'm sorry, I didn't like it very much, and I would probably not buy this book as a gift to my friends. A Room with a View by the famous E.M. Forster. I read this book and then I watched the movie. I liked them both. It talks about village, love, aristocracy, British society, social classes. Everything was unfold lightly, subtly. I really enjoyed the flow of this story and the views. Even if you're not interested in the book, maybe watch the videos. But heads up, there are some scenes in the movies that I was caught unprepared. Let's just put it that way. As I Lay Dying, one of William Faulkner's most well-known work, it was difficult to read, not just because it's the story flows between each characters. It's difficult to read. It's complicated in terms of switching points of views and getting a full picture, and the complicated situation that human beings were put in when facing life and death. So generally speaking, it's a really heavy topic with very heavy way to tell this story. It was not a book that you could pick up when you were waiting for the metro or waiting in the bus. I didn't really enjoy this book, but I liked it now after a while, after I put it down and gave it a few days to think. The back row. I made a video about this book, a book that traumatized me for about a month. And I bought this book as gifts to my other friends, and everybody ends up being traumatized. It's a very intense, emotionally intense story about love, country, different cultures, immigrations, getting stuck in life, chasing, losing, finding love again and again until the very end of one's life. It also, now that I think of it, after a while that I read it, it's also about human beings chasing the unobtainable things in their life. The chasing gave them meanings, gave their lives meanings. But what's the point at the end when you're dying? I don't know. This book, I love this book. Let me say it first. But it's really difficult to read. Actually, it's really easy to read because the story flows fantastically. The storytelling, the plots, the characters, everything was fantastic. But when you turn to the last page and when you put it down, it felt like you were hit by a trunk again and again, again and again. That's how complicated I feel about this book. Next, we have two Maupassant, selected stories of Maupassant and Bellamy. This one, Bellamy, I talked about in previous videos. We'll start with Bellamy then. It was fun. It talks about love and aristocracy again, and the gender and power dynamic brought by men and women and politics and media. There were a lot of interesting power dynamics, pairs in this story, not just between a man and a woman, but also a woman and a woman or a man and a man. I found this extremely interesting because it opened a window for us to peek about the life that French people used to have. And it's not surprising to find that some of the rules in terms of working, politics, journalism, media, and power struggles, and dating, especially even dating, still apply to present day. I find this book, I love this book. I enjoy reading it. It was fantastic. And then the selected stories of Maupassant, masterpiece. Let's just say it out. It talks about humanity and society and history and everything, every aspect in life. The good and the bad and the ugly, the beauty of life, the absolutely heartbroken aspects brought by people in your life. Reading this book feels like someone the author, Maupassant himself, stabbed me in my belly again and again by a twisted knife. He was so straightforward, straight to the point, brutally pointed out the life of people living years and years ahead of us. And you would also be surprised to find out that after so much time, nothing really changed in the world. Next, we have two Dostoyevsky. Oh God. We talked about both books in previous videos. Notes from Underground and White Knight. Notes from Underground is the book that gave me a headache and a fever. I still blame him to this day. It talks a lot about psychology and humanity and the dark side of people's mind, how one dealt with being lonely in their life and how they interact with each other and what it felt like being left alone in this world. It was a great work, but it's just don't read it before bed if you don't want a nightmare. And then White Knight, on the other hand, it's delicate, it's nostalgic, it talks about love, it's beautiful, and it's also a story about loneliness, but he wrote it with a much delicate tone, which made the book easier and softer to read. And it's also really short, so if you haven't read it, think about reading it. It's fun. We have also talked about this book before, briefly. Death in Venice by German author Thomas Mann. I repeat what I said before when we talked about this book. It's obscure, it's beautiful, it's tragic, it's philosophical, of course, but it's also distant and subtle. So it makes me really hard to have a feeling that I understand what happened in this book. It feels like you were watching this story unfold with a telescope. And I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it was a good book. I enjoyed reading it, kind of, but I felt like I didn't connect with it. The Book of Sand by Borges, my absolute favorite this year. It's a lot of puzzles, it's complicated short stories. You can find mystery and math and even science fiction in it, but in a Borges way, of course. He wrote everything in his own tone, the funny, interesting, twisted, and surprising way. And I especially love one of the story here because it's Salute, dedicated to H.P. Lovecraft. You don't need an introduction of him, right? And that story, it was amazing. You have to read it. You can probably tell my feelings about this book by my face now. Death of Ivan Ilyich by Tolstoy. They said it's the best short stories in literature history. I partly agree. Of course, it's you can tell by the title that it's a really heavy and serious topic. And in the story, through the plots and conversations, Tolstoy kept asking the most difficult, uncomfortably difficult questions one might occur in their life. How do you face death? What kind of life did you live? Was it the life that you always wanted? How are you going to deal with losing life, losing everything eventually, because it happens to all of us? It was mentally hard to read this story because it laid out every aspect and details about death in a brutally specific way. It's like facing death himself when you turn over the pages. It's absolutely well written, but it's a really heavy book. We've talked about this in previous videos. The Red and the Black by Stendhal. Let me just say it's a really heartbroken book to read. I cried at the end. It's too intense. I am way too invested in this story than I should. It's the whole story, to me, it feels like I am witnessing a story of a fallen guy. A guy that desperately want success in his own life, and he was willing to give everything he had and everything he could to gain this success, but he only ended up falling from the life he always wanted and falling to death in a painful way. I'm too invested in this book. The author manipulated my emotions like I was his puppet. That's how invested I felt about this book. And it's also surprisingly enjoyable and easy to read, because as a classic book, I always thought it would be really, really hard to follow, the plots, names, the conversations. It's not in this case. It was a fantastic book, but I don't want to read it again because I will cry. F.Scott Fitzgerald, The Beautiful and Damned. This book, first, it's quite long, so I spent quite some time on this book. It's a story about how beautiful people, as of course it's Fitzgerald's main focus, it's a story about how beautiful people wasted their life and their gift and being manipulated by greed and the hunger for money, for power, for material things. It's long, it's elegant, and it's cruel. It's mesmerizing, but it's also a great story. I was dragged in the pain of witnessing all of these events happen in their lives. And at the end of this story, there's nothing I can do but I just sit there and read and cried. Another classic, Brave New World by Huxley. Actually, I read this book a few years ago and I reread it. Of course, it's a masterpiece. It's probably one of the most important work in the history of literature. You can find a lot of themes that are related to our present life in this story. Technology, society, humanity, gender equality, and social classes, politics. The thing that I was moved the most now that I reread it was the book asked, in my opinion, the book asked the ultimate dilemma of humanity. Especially now when you can just open Instagram or any social media and spend the day in absolute happiness. Do you really want happiness, or do you want to be consciously aware of what happened in the world? It's been decades since this book was published, and I still think we don't have an answer for this question. That's why I think it's one of the books that everybody should read, especially now. Talk about this book as well, Living to Tell the Tale by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Absolutely mesmerizing, fantastically written memoir. That's all I will say because I've already talked about this book and how much I enjoyed reading it. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. A story with so many layers that it's impossible to understand it at all aspect the first time you read it. When I read it, I didn't really enjoy this because the story flows and it's really hard for me to catch the flow and ride with the flow. But now that I think back of this book, I understand why it's a classic decades after it was published, because as some of the books we discussed here, it talks about female aspects, how women see the world, gender equality, war, politics, society, and everything happened so naturally. It's like a river. You just flow with it. This book, first of all, I bought all of my best friends a copy of this book. If I can only read one book my whole life in this world, I will choose this book. This is a book that I will reread until the day I die, but this is a book that I could never do a book review video on because there are so many things in this book, so many feelings, emotions, philosophies, dilemmas, questions posed in this book. And I know a lot of BookTok authors or influencers talked about this book, but that's all I will say. I don't know how to describe my feelings about this book other than the fact that it's my book of life. It's a book that I will constantly going back to, but it's a book that I could never tell anyone, oh, this is a book about something and that's how I feel about this book. I cannot say it. It's too heavy. And I feel like discussing this book furthermore would be discussing the content of my soul. And let's try not do that. Stoner by John Williams. My book of life. That's all I could say. And then, oh, this is a really interesting one. Night Hutchinson by Wang Xiaobo. I read this book probably because I bought it a few years ago and it was on my desk for a long time until one day I just picked it up. It's about Chinese classical stories but told in a very modern way. So a lot of conversations and plots that could make it very easy to understand for modern audience. It's really funny and dark and really light in Xiaobo's way. So it's a really unique book. That's all I'll say, because it's retell of some of the most important stories in Chinese history. If you're interested in this aspect, I recommend this book. Last but not least, in the literature pile, oh God, why did I read so many heavy books? I don't understand. Three Tales by French author Gustave Flaubert. It's a religious story, so it's not about social classes or modern society. It was the last published work of Flaubert, so you could see that by the time he wrote these stories, his skills and ability of writing, of storytelling was incredibly mature. And as its religious story, it was difficult to understand, but he put it in a slightly better to interpret way. And if you like Oscar Wilde's famous play Salome, Gustave Flaubert wrote another version of the story Salome in it, and it was crazy. It felt like the world was spinning in my head when I read this book. I can't make it stop, and I'm painfully aware that actually I'm kind of enjoying the ride. Also, by the time we as we're continuing, I realized I have read too many heavy books in the first 6 months. But I hope this pile will make everybody feel better, because this is the Detective Stories Mystery Pile. We've talked about the first one, All She Said Was Yes, by Shirley Jackson. Dark, it creeps me out. Okay, that's all I would say. It creeps me out. Dark, interesting, mystery. It was scary and a lot of plot twist and suspense. Absolutely fantastic. That's all I would say, because I already made a video about that. The Speciality of the House by American author, I think, Stanley Ellin. Dazzling murder mysteries, a ton of plot twists, and everything was put in a very, designed in a very delicate way. Absolutely fantastic. And I realized I've read too many absolutely fantastic work. I probably need to update my vocabulary in English. And then, because we have already talked about these 5 books in previous videos, so I will skip it. Anthony Horowitz. We have the Hawthorne series, A Line to Kill, The Sentence is Death, and The Word is Murder, followed by 2 Susan Ryland series, Magpie Murder and Moonflower Murders. If you are looking for something really fun and complicated mysteries, but it was put and designed in a lightly manner, so there were a lot of modern elements in it, and you are looking for fun and complicated murder mysteries, go read this book, because it goes really well with all the snacks and vacations and all that. And I think that's probably the reason we love reading murder mysteries at the beginning, right? And then we have, I made little notes on these books about what I probably should say, some keywords of each book. On this book, I wrote in all capital letters, heart, 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 because I think I'm not smart enough to read and understand and review this book. The Name of the Rose by Italian author, legendary author Umberto Eco, I have never felt being swiped off my feet by an author. I don't think so in my life until Eco. It's a book about mid-century history, religions, murder, books, a lot of books, and lies and miracles and math. It's a book that I feel like only God can write. How come a human being write this book? How is it possible that a human being can write this book? It's so complicated, and it covers so many topics, and everything was put in a very delicately difficult way. As a reader, I was challenged, and I failed to understand the whole mystery plot. But also as a reader, I was absolutely amazed by how someone can write like this. And again, it's a very hard to read book. It's very challenging. It's very demanding. And I still feel like I'm not smart enough to mention this book. I don't know why. It's just a feeling. And last but not least, Richard Osman, We Solve Murders. I'm sorry if you like Richard Osman. I do, but still, I'm sorry. I hate this book. I think it's one of the worst books I've read this year. I love The Thursday Murder Club, so I'm really disappointed because I didn't follow the plot here. There were so many characters and the point of views changed too quickly. I didn't catch up with it, and I didn't even feel the thrill and exciting of witnessing and solving a murder. I didn't feel the thrill of reading a murder mysteries at all in this book. I'm so disappointed. How can it happen? What happened here? Because I enjoy all the Thursday Murder Club stories. And I have to say, in terms of mysteries, the case itself, the killings, the schemes, Richard Osman is slightly, in my opinion, weaker than Anthony Horowitz. But he created such lovely characters, and it shouldn't be like that. This book's supposed to be heartwarming and enjoyable, and it's like introducing new friends to me. I didn't feel like they are my friends at all. I felt like they were strangers, and I didn't even remember their names now that I think of it. I'm sorry, but I didn't really enjoy this book. So that's all for today's video. It's probably too short. I'm really sorry, but I'm swamped by work now. This is the best I could have come up with. I will probably do another video about Borges because I'm currently reading some of his books, and I think we're becoming best friends because I like him and his work so much. I enjoyed every page of his books because everything he wrote was fantastic. I also probably said too many fantastic in this video. But anyway, I hope you liked today's video and think about reading some of the works we've mentioned before. So thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.